Welcome back to Restore 2023 and the Book of Isaiah. Chapter 5 documents the conditions during the reign of Uzziah, which had many impressive achievements, but also saw the emergence of an increasingly corrupt, oppressive, and materialistic elite class. In response, Isaiah tells a parable about a vineyard, not unlike one told by Jesus in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The prophet knows that his message of judgment and condemnation is hardly likely to be popular, and so he dresses it up in a story that will get his hearers on side. Just like Nathan does when confronting David, Isaiah leads his audience to condemn the unfruitful vineyard as having every possible advantage and yet still failing to produce good fruit. Only then does he reveal that they themselves are the vineyard and their works the bad fruit. God, the vineyard owner, has created, sustained, and nourished Israel at every step. Without him, they would simply not exist as a nation. He's provided everything they need for human flourishing and blessed them as no other nation has been blessed by his presence in their midst. But they failed to fulfill their purpose. They failed to keep the covenant, especially its demands for social justice. We see in verse 8 that the rich are buying up great swathes of land and effectively evicting the poor, despite the fact that land in Israel was supposed to be owned permanently by particular families and could only be leased temporarily to others. They are debauched and love to run after pleasures, but they've got no regard for God and even sarcastically mock him, as in verse 19. Let him be quick, let him speed his work so that we may see it. And the irony is that the Lord's judgment is coming speedily, and they will indeed see it, but they won't like it when they do. In response to his vineyard's unfruitfulness, he will cut off the source of its life and nourishment, and also make it vulnerable to attack by removing the protections he had put in place. Both lack of rain and the resulting meagre crops are covenant curses promised in Deuteronomy for disobedience. By their actions, the ruling elite have brought about the ruin of the whole nation, not just themselves. And by his judgment, the Lord is proved to be holy and worthy of worship. We get a glimpse here of just what a terrible thing it is to fall into the hands of the living God, and just how much Christ has saved us from in turning away the wrath our sins deserved. In the case of the Israelites, this wrath will come in the form of foreign invaders. They are unnamed here, but the passage almost certainly refers to the Assyrians. All nations are God's to command, and he will use any that he wishes to humble his disobedient people. And it's in this context of impending judgment that Isaiah receives his commission as the Lord's prophet. He's no detached, self-righteous observer. The final woe in these chapters is for himself, as he identifies with his sinful, unclean people. His response is the only appropriate one to a vision of the holy God, an overwhelming sense of unworthiness and conviction. So holy is this God that even the sinless and dazzling seraphim are overwhelmed and can only repeatedly praise him. Isaiah is sure that he is about to be struck dead, because it was commonly believed that nobody could see God and live. Yet amazingly, the prophet is allowed access to the divine counsel. More amazingly still, he's allowed to speak and his voice is heard. It's interesting to compare the experience of Jeremiah during his commissioning. Both prophets have their mouths touched, because it is by their words that they will primarily serve. In Isaiah's case, the coal represents the gracious provision of the temple and its services, by which God has provided a way to deal with sins. This grace was open to the Israelites, but they'd spurned it. Once Isaiah is cleansed, he is bold to offer himself for service, and amazingly his service is accepted by God, despite his continued unworthiness. This should be an encouragement for all of us as forgiven people. Sadly, like so many of the prophets, Isaiah's ministry will serve to harden the hearts of those to whom he goes, making the judgment that has already been announced inevitable. We'll see this acted out in chapters 7 to 11 as we read on. However, the chapter does end on a hopeful note, with the promise that a stump will remain in the land, from which the nation can regrow. God is faithful where we are faithless, and his covenant never fails.